Anthony gave one of the best speech in the Polyglot Conference in Budapest, and I'm so happy I was able to interview him today. And in this interview, what you're going to learn is what motivates Anthony to learn multiple languages, what his daily routine is, and if you're busy, if you got work, you got kids, you don't have 1 hour to study a language in a day, he got you covered. Hi Anthony, thank you so much for taking your time to do this interview with us.
Welcome, Brian.
Okay, awesome. So, as I just told you, I just watched your Polyglot Conference talk that you did in Budapest again, because I was there and I met you there.
That's
and
right.
it was really awesome. And for those of you who want to learn Anthony's approach, you can watch that video. However, do you think that approach works for everybody?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what works for everybody. I only know what works for me.
Yeah.
And my approach has always been to try things out. And if firstly they work, and secondly I like them, then I stick with them. Because I don't want to do something I don't like, and I don't want to do something that doesn't work.
Totally.
So I just try out different techniques, find those that I enjoy and that work, and then stick with them. But I've tried many things and rejected them because they didn't work or I didn't like them. And I recommend that people do the same. I can't tell people what's right for them.
Yeah.
I can just offer them more options and that they can add to those they try. And if they like them and they work, then great. If they don't, move on to something else.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I've been interviewing I'm doing research on many different polyglots, and there are two. When you mentioned one thing that if they work, great, and the second thing, the most important thing is also if I like it, because it can work beautiful, really effective, but I don't like it. I can't. There's no way I can continue to keep on doing it, right?
Sure. I play guitar quite a lot, and one of the guitar teachers says all the time, you have to differentiate between the time you're learning and the time you're playing. He said, if you just spend all your time learning, you'll never truly appreciate the guitar. If you spend all your time playing, you'll never advance in your guitar. And I try to separate these two things as well with languages. I limit the amount of time I spend studying and learning, and then I view other time as playtime with the language, watching videos, talking to people, listening to audio, reading books, and so on. And I think balancing those two, the way I have done with the guitar, really helps me dramatically. And one of the biggest mistakes I had as a beginner, I think, was overemphasizing the learning part. I think a lot of people suffer from this, of buying too many textbooks.
Yeah.
You buy one textbook, read it, and you think, I'm not getting very far, I'll buy another one. And then you buy another one, and they end up on the shelf, never used, and you feel guilty, and you think, I should be studying hard. But you never actually finish any of them, and you never allow yourself to enjoy the language, to play with the language.
Brilliant. So what do you find most enjoying for you?
Okay, so what I like actually is using languages in real life. A lot of people say one of the things they like doing is having connections with people, having conversations. Yeah. But maybe I'm a weirdo. I don't particularly find that the most enjoyable thing.
Yeah.
Just sitting next to somebody on the bus and having a conversation, it's fine. But what I find most enjoyable is getting something done that I couldn't have done without the language. So two good examples of this are the electricity company sent me a bill for a huge amount of money and a fine saying I had damaged my electric meter. Oh. This is here in Prague. And I phoned up and I spoke. They actually put it to their legal department because it was such a large amount. And so they sent 2 engineers out, and I was having to speak in Czech to these engineers about how electric meters work and how much I'd consumed, those kind of stuff. And it was quite advanced stuff, I think. And then I had to speak to their lawyer and explain they'd actually replaced somebody else's meter and thought they'd replaced mine. And they'd misread the meter numbers. And explaining this was, I thought, quite complicated stuff. And I was really pleased that I was able to do it in Czech. Firstly, because all the hard work paid off, but secondly, because it solved a real problem.
Wow.
And without that real problem, I wouldn't have felt the same satisfaction just from saying hello, nice weather to somebody.
Totally. Yeah. Wow.
So another example is that I was in Paris recently, and I decided I would only speak French for 2 weeks in Paris, just to get a bit of exercise with it. And saying hello and so on to people was nice. But then I was in a restaurant with my wife and got speaking to the waiter. We said we were from Prague, and he sent the owner of the restaurant to us, and we had this really good conversation because he'd just been to Prague with his wife. So we had a nice conversation in French about that. And then I started to talk to him about his restaurant, and he said, oh, yes, blah, 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 blah. And eventually he gave us this huge amount of food for free and all these drinks.
Wow.
And we paid for some things, but we got all these extra courses and all these drinks and so on. And I thought that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been speaking French to the guy. So it's, as I said, not so much just connecting with people, but achieving things that you couldn't achieve without the language. That's what I get the biggest buzz from, because it really makes me all the hard work paid off.
Totally. I'm getting goosebumps just listening to your stories.
And the reason I learned Czech actually originally was my wife. I worked in Prague in an English-speaking environment, and I nearly, for a couple of years, never really bothered with the language. You can survive very well here, as you can in many countries, in some kind of expat bubble.
Yes.
But then I met my wife, and after a couple of years, we were madly in love and wanted to get married and so on. So I decided I would give my wedding speech in Czech.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be humorous to keep the audience awake.
Yes.
And also quite informative. So I got pretty intensive into studying the language, and I wrote this speech. And I did it all in secret, so nobody really knew I was doing it.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it was only a 15-minute speech, but I gave the whole speech in Czech. And my wife was crying, and her parents were crying, and everybody in the audience was laughing and so on. And again, that shows it's not just connecting with people, it's about making something happen. I wanted to see the emotional reactions of people at my wedding. And so having that specific goal there is a real motivator for me.
Wow. That's amazing. So is Czech your first language that you try to learn by yourself?
It's difficult to say because I used to live in Luxembourg, and in Luxembourg I learned to speak quite good French. I'm quite good in French now. Well, I was probably even better then, but I can speak French pretty well. And I learned Luxembourgish as well. Do you know Luxembourg has its own language, Luxembourgish, and it's sort of Luxembourgish, yeah, and it's sort of German with French bits in it and so on.
Okay.
And I learned that so I could speak to shopkeepers and old people and so on, many of whom wouldn't actually speak English or much French at all. But I learned those more for practical reasons, just to to get by.
Yeah.
It was only when I came to Prague that I realized that having a specific goal and then real achievements from something is what really motivates me. Awesome. So it's probably in the past 5 years that I've been really very serious about learning languages, and now I've sort of spread it out to quite a few different languages. And having a specific goal there to make things happen that you couldn't make happen otherwise is very, very important to me. If you're just learning languages because you think it'd be a neat idea, I don't think that's sufficient motivation.
Yeah, not enough.
You might start out with a lot of initial excitement, but it'll wear off over time.
Totally.
But when you see things actually happening with the language that wouldn't have happened without the language, then it's like a drug high almost, like a real buzz from it.
Now that's very interesting. When you said you have a goal, like what I don't know exact word that you just said. You said something like achieving something, producing a result that you wouldn't have.
Right.
You won't be able to do it without speaking the language.
Okay, so that is the goal. The goal isn't something specific. And my goal in Czech, for example, wasn't to speak to the electricity company.
Totally. You don't know that. You don't know when it's going to come
But my
out.
goal is to be able to have experiences in a language that I could not have without that language. So, do you see what I mean? So when I went to Paris, I wanted to be able to have experiences that would not be possible without the language.
Did you move to Prague before for work beforehand, and then you met your wife, or you came to Prague
Yes.
before your wife because of your
Yeah,
wife?
so I actually was working in a consultancy company, and I lived in lots of different countries. I think 12 different countries for various lengths of time. And they'd sent me to Prague for a year, and at the end of the year, the company boss said, "No, you have to move to the new office in Baghdad." I didn't want to live in Baghdad. I said no. So he said, "Well, you've got to go to Baghdad, or you're leaving the company." So I left the company, and I was unemployed. So I decided to set up a company of my own. And I stole many of the employees from my previous company. They all said, we want to come and work for you, not stay with the other guy.
Yeah.
And sort of as a reward for providing a job to one of the guys, he said, "Oh, what'll really keep you here is if you meet a woman. I'll set you up on some dates." So he set me up on a bunch of dates with various women, and then eventually
Wow.
one of those women was my wife, and I was really impressed with her, and it just went from there.
I see. And that time you still couldn't speak
Czech.
Czech, right?
No, not at all. No. I've been here now officially for 8 years, actually.
Okay.
And for the first 2 years, I didn't learn anything at all.
Yeah.
And then for about a year, I messed around with it a bit,
Kinda like me.
half-heartedly.
Where I'm at right now. Yes, go on.
Are you learning Czech?
No, German.
Oh, German.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
No, I don't.
First 2 years, I'm resisting it. I don't want
Yeah,
to.
exactly. Yes.
And I'm just messing around a little bit. Yeah.
So, and then about 5.5 years ago, I decided, well, let's get serious with it.
That's because you wanted to do the speech.
Exactly.
Is that right? But then when was the first time you met your father-in-law?
No. Okay.
That story that you told me, that was really cool.
Okay. So I actually met my father-in-law a few months before the wedding. They don't live in Prague. They live quite far away.
Okay.
And yes, so I had my Czech then, because I was half-hearted with it, not very good, to be honest.
I
wasn't
see.
very good.
Got it.
But I had a conversation. I hope this is the same conversation you
Yes.
mean. But I had a conversation with him. He lived in the countryside, and we were talking away in my broken Czech, and we heard a noise in the background on a tree. Oh no, was it on a? Yes, it was on a tree. And it was a woodpecker, a bird. And I started talking about woodpeckers. And he went, "Oh, how do you know that word?" "Well, I'm learning the language, aren't I?" And he was very impressed. It was a very nice conversation to have, just because he was sort of surprised that I knew this random word. And he sort of switched then to liking me, from me being this weird stranger to me being this guy he could sort of relate to. It was like an instant connection with the guy. And then he very quickly decided that I was the right man for his job. So I think I actually think that I did get parental approval by knowing the word for woodpecker.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so then is that when you realize that, wow, learning a language is really can give you results or
Right. So
experience that you wouldn't have if
right.
you didn't learn it.
So this is so several things led me. So that one, when it just said woodpecker, and I realized, well, I connected to the guy there, and it made him like me all of a sudden, and now I can marry his daughter.
Ooh, that's big deal, hey?
Big deal from knowing the word woodpecker. Yeah. And it really
Everybody
taught-
run out. How do you say woodpecker?
Exactly. But it was one of several moments when I realized
yeah.
that what really excites me
Yeah, tell me.
is making changes, making things happen through the language, not just having casual conversations with people, with strangers, but actually being able to make things happen that would not have happened without that conversation.